Hello and welcome to Vamos, your DELE A2 podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing vocabulary for the DELE A2. We're going to see why it's so important and how to help you study better. Are you ready? Vamos! Okay, so if you're learning or studying for the DELE A2, it's very likely that you're coming across so many new words when you're reading or listening to texts and that you don't know what to do with it. Probably what you're doing, I'm going to guess, but I'm guessing that what you're going to do is just write down a list in your notebook where you'll have everything mixed in together. So you'll have nouns and verbs and things related to advertisements mixed with family vocabulary and free time, all in one page where everything is just mixed. And probably, if you're like me, you never open that page again because it's too overwhelming and you don't know where to start. So let's change our focus and let's see how we can make sense of all the new vocabulary and how we can implement it and put it into practice. My first tip would be to divide it into categories. I'm going to be sharing with you how I structured the vocabulary for my students. This, of course, is just an example, but hopefully it helps you see what I'm talking about. So the 5 categories that I use are family and housing, routines and health, cities and towns, studies and work, free time and traveling. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of each one of them, but I imagine that it gives you kind of an overview of what I mean. So in each category, I'm going to be adding all the vocabulary related to that field. Now, how do I add the vocabulary? I try to group it into smaller groups. So for example, when I'm talking about family, I'm going to be using in one section all the vocabulary related to relationships. So I'm going to be saying grandma, aunt, cousin, all the vocabulary that is related to family members, for example. In another section, I might use adjectives. So how can I describe the people in my family? I can say they are friendly, they are open, they are talkative. So all the adjectives related to the people that we saw. And I'm also going to be including some verbs, some actions related to family. So in this case, for example, it makes sense to write down all the verbs related to life events, such as being born, getting married, getting divorced, finding a new job. So all life events. If you notice, this structure already makes our brain much more relaxed because we know what group we're studying, and so it gives us a focus. Instead of having all the vocabulary mixed, we just go one by one, section by section, checking that we know the vocabulary. In this case, I think it's very important to realize that many times we know the vocabulary when we read it, but we cannot use it. So this would be my first tip for you. Try to do this in your mother tongue, in English first, and then try to translate and see which words you actually know in Spanish. And for those words you don't know, highlight them in a different color so that when you come across them, you're reminded of these new words and you try to incorporate them into your active vocabulary, the vocabulary that you can actually use, not only understand in a text, but also use on your own. My second tip would be to help you create mind maps. Now, I'm going to try to explain what a mind map is, and I'm going to show you an example in the video. So if you're watching the video, it's probably much simpler for you to understand. If not, let me try to guide you through what a mind map is and how it's going to help you. So this is a mind map related to holidays, and in it, as you can see, the vocabulary is grouped into different sections, and they're not necessarily only words as we saw in the list before, they're also longer sentences. So let me give you an example so that I can explain what I'm talking about. So for example, in this mind map about holidays, we have the first section in which we're going to be talking about the different activities that I normally do when I'm on holiday. So instead of writing just museum, I'm going to write visiting a museum, or going out for lunch, or going to the beach, or having a walk, or visiting the monuments. So this is the first section, in which, as you can see, I'm not only putting one single word, I'm putting a whole unit, and I'm also adding a picture. Because if you're like me and you have a visual memory, this is going to help you memorize the vocabulary much easier than if you're just having the simple lists as we saw before. In another section of this holiday mind map, we might have, for example, transportation methods. So we can say on foot, by car, by train. So these are sections of sentences. It's not a full sentence, but it's going to help me create the sentence. And lastly, we can even add a section in which we have, for example, opinions about our trip. So we can say the weather was nice, we had a lot of fun, it was really interesting. And in this case, it's a full sentence that I just copy and paste mentally and that I can have ready for use if I'm writing a text. As you can see, mind maps are extremely helpful, not only to organize our brain, but also to make the most of the writing task. Because you're going to have already all the vocabulary that you need, and in a visual way. So when you're writing the day of the exam, or when you're speaking, you're actually going to come up with full sentences, and this is going to save you time, but also make sure that you're using the correct grammar. Isn't that great? Okay. But what about memorizing itself? Because yes, this can be fun to create, but there is part of the vocabulary, which I always say, which is just sitting down and studying. Now, if you're like me, this is not something that's very pleasant. So let me give you a couple of tricks to help you gain vocabulary faster. So the first one is called Quizlet. I don't know if you've heard about it, but I think it is a wonderful tool to help you, especially with memorizing. They are flashcards, so a very traditional way of studying, but they also include games such as matching, where you can just match the term with the definition. So it's a very easy way to practice with vocabulary. Another great way is to use the post-it method. Now, what is this, you might ask? Well, it's very simple. You just take some post-its, as the name suggests, and you write down the vocabulary that you want to learn. So especially for the A2, you're going to have a lot of vocabulary of things around your house that you want to memorize. So you might want to memorize door, window, table, chair. So what do? You write it in Spanish: la mesa, la silla, la puerta, la ventana, and just place the post-its all over your house so that you come across them time and again until you memorize them. Finally, my last piece of advice would be for you to read with some special lenses, as I always say. So in this case, it's the studying lens. You're going to go through new texts and try to see which words come up that you didn't know before and which words you can include into your personal vocabulary. So when you're doing the reading and the listening tasks, you're taking notes that are also going to help you in the speaking and the writing tasks. So it's a kind of a win-win situation where you're not only improving your reading and your listening, but also your productive tasks, so the speaking and the writing. So how did you find this podcast episode? I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something new. Hopefully you're going to put it into practice. If you do, please type in the comments which strategy you followed and how it helped you. If you have any other tips or tricks to memorize new vocabulary, I'd be happy to know about it. I really look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Nos vemos!